Hey, sports fans, it's world champion handicapper Mike North. Punch this number in your phone right now. If you're driving, pull over. 1-800-808-3419, 1-800-808-3419 for a free pick and info for the premier handicapping site in the country, VegasScoresAndOdds.com. It's the only site you'll ever need with expert handicappers like John Anthony, Denny Macklin, Tony Sacco, Ray Monahan, yours truly, and many more. Check out the homepage of VegasScoresAndOdds.com for a tote board with your buddy. Follow Vegas Scores and Odds on Twitter and dial up 1-800-808-3419. That's 1-800-808-3419, 1-800-808-3419, or go to VegasScoresAndOdds.com.
The following program is distributed by the Bears Barroom Radio Network. It's presented live over MixLR.com and later disseminated in podcast format on most delivery platforms. It's intended for all audiences. Never before in the history of sports podcast has one show made this promise. Draft on Tap will report on every college prospect pro scouts are looking at for the 2020 NFL Draft. Every one of them.
Sanders, smothered. Chase Young, another big play.
Montez second and goal. Steps in. Caught, touchdown. The third passing touchdown of the first half for Steven Montez. There's Johnson. He's got it. Touchdown, Texas. An open man at the 25. A foot race for the tight end. There's that man again. Albert O with his second score. 47 yards.
Draft on Tap with Bears Barroom draft analyst Danny Shimon. Your host, Ryan Badgley. And featuring some of the most respected draft analysts in the country. Grab a beer. We're about to make history.
And making history is what we do on Bears Barroom Radio Network. I'm your host, Ryan Badgley, and welcome to Draft on Tap. We have an exciting show planned for you tonight, as we'll be joined by Arif Hasan of The Athletic. He covers the Minnesota Vikings. So let's introduce our Bears Barroom draft analyst, none other than my buddy, my man, Mr. Danny Shimon. Danny, how you doing tonight, brother? I think you're on mute, Danny. No, I'm on mute. There I am. Okay, hey, let's try that again. Live radio. Making history is what we do on Bears Barroom Radio Network. I'm your host, Ryan Badgley, and welcome to Draft on Tap. We have an exciting show planned for you tonight, as we'll be joined by Arif Hasan of The Athletic. So let's introduce our Bears Barroom draft analyst, none other than Danny Shimon. Danny, how you doing tonight, bud?
I'm doing great, man. I was a little scared there because I'm like, did I lose my partner, Ryan Badgley, here? Did he just up and leave, drop the mic, and walk away?
It's just a constant bit of trash from me over the last few weeks here. And I have to apologize to our listeners for that because, oh, geez, I had my mic on mute, as I'm typing, saying what's up to everybody in the chat. And, I turned my mic on mute so you couldn't hear anything.
Sorry, man. You're multitasking. It's great.
Yeah, trying to retweet everything and all that stuff. But how's things for you, Danny? How are things going? And what's new? We're 2 weeks away from, or 2 weeks removed from the Senior Bowl, and I'm sure you've really got to be delving into tape.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I've been doing since the Senior Bowl. We had our quick, Senior Bowl recap show last week. We talked about some of the players, some of the prospects we interviewed, and due to some of the technical audio issues we had, we're going to replay some of those interviews that we played last week for those who missed it. But yeah, we met some talented players. Got a chance to watch, a bunch of practices throughout the week. And basically what I did was I marked down some players that really caught my eye that I hadn't really delved into in terms of their tape yet. So I'm just coming back and just, jotting my notes and delving into those tapes. And one of the guys that really caught my eye, and those, people who follow me on Twitter saw me tweet some of the stuff out on Matt Hennessy, offensive lineman Temple, a guy who plays center, has the necessary length and wingspan to, I believe, to also play guard as well. So another guy you can come in and play kind of like a Cody Whitehair, if you will, guy who can play center and guard for you. It's at 6'4", 302 pounds, 33-inch arms. Definitely a guy that impressed me. So he's one of the guys I've delved into in terms of tape. There's some defensive backs I'm going to be delving into. That's a group that I really are going to start focusing on in the next couple of weeks, are the corners and the safeties. As we know that's going to be a prominent need for the Bears in this coming off season, whether they attack it in free agency, whether they attack it more likely probably in the draft. So that's going to be a position group, and there's some players that caught my eye down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. So just basically just grinding away more tape, getting some more, getting some more information on these guys, and then preparing obviously for the combine. And that's where, these guys go and they do all the agility tests, the speed tests, the medicals and all that stuff. So it's just a process, man. Just grinding away here until we get to draft night.
So let's do this, Danny. For those maybe new listeners to Draft on Tap, let's take them through the positions that you have touted for the Chicago Bears that they most likely will be looking at in this upcoming draft.
Yeah, for me, when I look over the Bears roster and look over some of their possible cap casualties, guys they may let go to create additional cap space to bring in some new players, and in positions that I feel like they lack the necessary depth, will need to replenish some of the talent, are first and foremost is the offensive line. I feel like they need at least 2 new players on offensive line, whether that's going to be a free agent and a draft pick, 2 free agents, veteran free agents, or 2 draft picks. I think they need a guard, and I think they need a young tackle, at least someone to put in the pipeline to at least challenge incumbent starters, Leno and Massey.
Yeah.
So that's a position of need that I feel is probably top priority in my eyes. Tight end is another top priority. Whether it's a U stretch tight end where the guy who lines up in the slot is predominantly a pass catching threat down the field, which is what I think they might be going for, or if you want to get a Y tight end, a guy that can line up in line and be a solid point of attack blocker, be able to also give you something in the passing game as well. I definitely think that's an area of need as well. Now we've talked about some of the free agents out there in terms of NFL veteran free agents, so that might be an area where they attack. The tight end might be a position where they attack via free agency. If not, we've gone over some of the prospects here in the upcoming draft. Edge rusher,
Yep.
I know they like Leonard Floyd. They picked up his option. He's going to be on the team next year. However, I still think they need more from that position. And then whether it's a young kid that's going to come in and be a situational pass rusher, early on in his career until he develops an overall game and becomes a better run defender, or if it's someone they just bring in, like I said, again, another option was, bring in a veteran, a vested veteran they can bring in a 1-year deal, maybe just a kind of a prove-it deal. But that's a position of need, in my opinion. Receiver, speed receiver is a position that I think a lot of people might disagree with me I should say, because, they need a guy. If you watch the Kansas City Chiefs, right? And you watch the Eagles and you watch the teams that run the similar system, similar offense, they need those speed demons. They need those track relay guys, if you will, that can take the top off of defense and stretch the field. And, for the Bears, that guy pretty much was Taylor Gabriel.
Yeah.
Last season he endured some concussions, some injury issues. He's got a cap number where there's some doubt whether he'll be on the roster coming in, next season. So that's a position I think is a huge need, is not just the receiver position, because they have good receivers in terms of the Allen Robinsons, the Anthony Millers. I like the young developing guys and Javon Wims and Riley Ridley. But I want a speed guy. I want a guy a quick twitch guy. A guy who can get the ball in his hands and he can do things, on a 5-yard slant, or he can do things with a bubble screen or a slip screen or something like that. Guys like Tyreek Hill, those types of players, guys that can get Mecole Hardman, guys who can just get them the ball and let them do their thing, not necessarily have them run routes and get open downfield. So obviously if they could do that, that'd be great too. So a receiver is a position of need, speed receiver predominantly. For me, quarterback, a young quarterback is a need position. I've talking to some people, I've heard that might not be something that the Bears are going to be looking at, particularly in this draft, because of the lack of picks in the mid range. So, they have no first round pick. They have only 2 second round picks, and for as of right now, no third, no fourth. They have 2 fifths, 2 sixths, and a 7th. I believe that's how it lays out the rest of the draft. So that's where they need to go ahead and if they make a trade and either acquire more picks, they're going to need some more additional opportunities, if you will, to go up there and make selections. So I think that's where if you do get some of those additional picks, then I can see them maybe using one of those for a developmental type. But if they stay at this at this number right now, because they have so many needs. Remember, we have inside linebacker we haven't talked about yet. Danny Trevathan and Nick Kwiatkowski are both free agents. Are they going to be re-signed? Kevin Pierre-Louis, who did an admirable job filling in last year as well. He's also a free agent. So technically, you only have one middle linebacker right now, and that's Roquan Smith. So that's a position where you're going to get some depth and probably even get a starter. Defensive line. We got Akeem Hicks coming back, but then we got Roy Robertson Harrison being a free agent, pending free agent. We got Nick Williams, a pending free agent.
Right.
So they got some questions there as well. So that's another sneaky spot where you can probably bring in some depth and so on and so forth. So, but just to kind of answer your question, offensive line, tight end, edge rusher, speed receiver, quarterback, and then inside linebacker those are my need positions that I'm looking at for the Bears.
Yeah, and the speed receiver thing, Danny, you look at the team that just won the Super Bowl and what they have, I mean, that's what they have is speed up and down their receiver group. I mean, yes, they have Travis Kelce, who, he's kind of your big target, but a guy like Sammy Watkins, now he's probably not as fast as he once was, but I'll tell you what, his feet are very good because he's able to get away from defenders to get to the ball, and then he does have that breakaway speed. And with Nagy coming from there, he's one of those, that's the type of guy you want to see on the Bears roster.
Right. I mean, you want, like I said, that the guy that can strike that fear on a defensive, coordinator or safeties and corners and say, all right, this guy we got to be careful of because this guy can score quickly. And guys like you just mentioned, Tyreek Hill, Mecole Hardman, guys like that. Even the Marcus Robinsons, the Sammy Watkins, even Travis Kelce, although he's not really known as a speed guy, but for a tight end, a big tight end, he's got some pretty good athletic ability downfield as well. So that's what you need here. And I think the Bears, one thing that needs to be stressed here is not only do they need to add speed at the receiver position, but I think they need to add speed, all around, in terms of, a backup running back. You need to add some speed at tight end. We already talked about maybe, we talked about a receiver. On defense too, I think you need to have some speed as well, whether it's, the linebackers, whether it's the safeties and some of the corners. So, team speed is an area that I think overall the Bears need to upgrade on both sides of the ball. And that's also something that I put into consideration here, especially when I'm looking at positions where, they can upgrade. So that's why when I did my mock draft last week, where I used specifically guys that I saw at the Senior Bowl, and Antonio Gibson, the running back / receiver / return guy from Memphis, was a guy I put on there, or I mocked to the Bears with one of their 5th round picks because of his ability to do what we just talked about, get the ball in his hands and have him, create big plays, positive plays downfield. That's a guy that played receiver, running back at college, and as a guy that specifically wants to come in and play running back at the NFL level. So he's a guy that's going to present some pass catching options out of the backfield for you. You can line him up, like I said, in slot.
Absolutely.
You can use him in a return game. You can just get the ball in his hands. A kid that didn't play at the Senior Bowl, but that I'm very high on is this kid Brandon Ayuk from Arizona State. 5'11", 201 pounds. The kid's got big play of potential. You watch his tape, and he'll take a 5-yard. I was talking about earlier. Take a 5-yard slant and could go all the way, or could go 40, 50 yards downfield. He's got that playmaking ability. Another guy that wasn't necessarily down in Mobile, but a guy I like a lot is KJ Hamler. This junior from Penn State, only 5'8", 5'9", 170 pounds. But he's another guy, playmaker, get the ball in his hands, and he's a guy that can create positive yards once he gets the ball in his hands, and he's a guy that can create separation with his speed, with his body control, with his quick feet, and so playmakers like that is what I'm looking for specifically when I'm talking about some of the skill positions on offense, whether it's receiver, tight end, or backup running back.
So I'm going to recap your draft from last week, Danny. We did put it out on Twitter, but for the folks that didn't hear the show, I really think Danny did an excellent job of targeting players for the draft. And with the Bears' first pick at number 43 of the second round, Danny went and attacked that offensive line due to the fact that that's kind of what we needed. I went ahead and my first pick is Josh Jones, big 6'5", 311-pound offensive lineman from Houston. Yeah. And
you playing the chimes there?
I did, yeah. I had to get the chimes in there. That's kind of why I was delaying a little bit. But so you went with Josh Jones, the offensive tackle from Houston, right. Which, you said just a few moments ago, you feel that's a need for the Bears in that position. Right. And Jones is a guy that I was high on coming into the week down in Mobile, just watching his tape, from the University of Houston. However, he had such a good week that his stock has really risen. And if you do any sort of surfing on the web and you look at some of these mock drafts, you see him now being mocked not only in the first round, but you see him top 15. I've seen one where he was top 10. Wow.
But this kid, if those are any sort of indicator in terms of how much his stock has risen, Josh Jones may not even be anywhere near the area that the Bears, have a chance to pick him. So, but yeah, I mean, in this mock that I did last week, I had Josh Jones as their first overall pick at pick number 43. And if that actually happens, that's one hell of a player. I think he's a kid that can come in and potentially challenge either tackle spot year one, to be able, for some playing time. So, and that's what I want to bring in, a young tackle. A guy that can put some pressure on the incumbent starters right now in Charles Leno Jr. and Bobby Massey. So yeah, that was my first pick.
And you see him playing either side, Danny?
Yeah, athletically he's got the length, he's got the feet, he's got the natural knee bend, the balance to play left tackle. But he also has the temperament, the strength, the play strength to also be able to, make people move at the line of scrimmage. He can roll his hips, generate that power that I talked about all the time about, from his lower body, from his core, and get defensive linemen on their heels, gain positive momentum for the offense. You can have a running back run up his back, gain 2, 3, 4 yards, and if not, break a long run. So for me, he could play both left or right side. Obviously, he's a left tackle now, so you want to put him in there, and that's a more premium position, if you will.
Sure.
Although in today's NFL, really, if you look at it, both tackles, their left and right tackles, have to be able to pass protect. So, but still, the left tackle is still considered one of the more premium positions on a football team. So I would definitely put him there and have him challenge Charles Leno for that position.
At the number 50 pick, Danny, you had Bryson Hopkins, the tight end from Purdue. And, we obviously have talked about him before, but I mean, I fell in love with this kid there. I mean, just the one practice I saw. Your thoughts on him?
Yeah, Bryson Hopkins came into the Mobile week as my top overall rated tight end. And right now he's still on, if I look at my rankings right now, he's still my number one tight end. And predominantly because of his playmaking ability downfield. We talked about earlier, bringing some of that speed element on offense, some of that skill positions, whether it's receiver, running back, tight end. Hopkins would give you that. He's at 6'4", 241 pounds, 32-inch arms, 10 1/8 hand size. He's a guy, when you watch him on tape, he just looks like a big bulked up receiver. He runs clean, sharp, crisp routes, has active, really quick feet. And my comp for him is Zach Ertz from the Philadelphia Eagles. So when we talked to him down in Mobile, we interviewed him, and I told him that's my comp for you, and he kind of agreed that some of the teams have also kind of seen him in similar ways. So that's how I would see him. So if you want to envision how I see the Bears utilizing a kid like Bryson Hopkins and his talent, is kind of like Zach Ertz, a guy that can be a guy that can stretch the field in terms of the middle of the field, the seam, be the quarterback's best friend, basically control anything in the middle of that field. A mismatch versus linebackers, when a linebacker's covering him one-on-one, you always see Hopkins win that matchup, create separation, with, like I said, body control, quickness and speed, and be able to create separation and make big plays down the field. So that's why Brycen Hopkins, as of today, is my top-rated tight end.
And here is that interview that we did with Brycen Hopkins right after Thursday's practice.
Brycen Hopkins, so how's the week been going so far for you?
Even for me and all the tight ends, I think everybody, we might have started off a little slow, being the first day, getting accustomed to just the routine. And then just as you go through the week, we get more comfortable in setting, and we start making plays, and we start making more plays and get more comfortable with the plays that we're running. So, I think we were definitely on an incline, and hopefully we can accumulate all that together in the game and just have a great game.
Talking to you on Tuesday, you said that blocking was one of the areas you were looking to improve on. You think I saw you do some blocking drills. I think it's pretty good.
I'm just out here trying to show some physicality. I was one of the lighter tight ends at 241. That was okay. And then I can still gain weight on that fact, but as long as I'm in there sticking my head in there, showing that I have sound technique and that I can improve in the next level, I think that's what I'm here to do. And I've tried to do that, and I have.
Now, Purdue, I've seen your tape, and you've lined up both as a slot receiver and also as a wide line. Are you comfortable doing both? Is there one you prefer over the other?
Of course, no. I realize that the next level, how valuable that dual threat tight end is, being able to line in line and deceiving the defense. You don't know if you're blocking or going out in a route, and actually being able to block if you are, but also having that down the field threat as a slot. That's something I pride myself on, and that athleticism that God blessed me with. I think it's best if I use it out there to the best of my ability. So. But I do understand that dual threat tight end is very, very high valued, and I'm willing to do that as well. So, yeah.
The coaches are working here with you on hand placement, in terms of
a big thing for all of those tight ends this week has been pad level. So just leverage. Don't let the defense get up under you. Try to get up under them. Get your hands inside. Drive your feet. Have a good base. That's really what we were trying to do as far as technique.
Awesome. So we're Chicago Bears.
Yeah, and then my stupidity there is I cut the interview off as Danny was about to ask him if he had spoken to the Bears or not, and he told us that he had spoken to the Bears. But as that doesn't necessarily mean anything. They're doing their homework on everybody. But yeah, Danny, with your second pick of the second round at number 50. You went with Brycen Hopkins, the tight end from Purdue, and so
kind of like the way sorry to cut you off there, but the way we talked about this last week is this position, the tight end position specifically, for me, in my opinion, it's a bit top heavy. So there is no first round pick in terms of my grades. I don't have a guy rated to go in the first round, but what I do have is a bunch of guys that are going to second round, third round. So if you're going to go for a tight end, so if the Bears are going to select a tight end, it's either going to be in this second, third round range. Because once you get past that, then you're talking about projecting and you're talking about possibly taking a kid for his traits and maybe developing into a pass catching tight end or a blocking tight end. So if they don't attack it via free agency, I expect one of these two second round picks to be a tight end.
Yeah, without question, Danny, and some great news as our guest has joined us. Arif Hasan from The Athletic has just joined us. Arif, welcome to Draft on Tap, my man. This is Ryan Badgley, the host of Draft on Tap. It's a pleasure to meet you, man. How you doing?
I'm good. Sorry for the delay, man.
Oh, no problem, man. That's not a problem at all, man. I'd like to introduce you to our Bears Barroom draft analyst, Danny Shimon. Danny, say hello to Arif.
Arif, how you doing tonight? Thanks again for joining us.
I'm good. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. It's we're just glad to have you on and that you could join us tonight. And so, Arif, now being Bears fans, how does it feel joining a podcast with Bears fans, being that you cover the Vikings?
I hope we don't talk too much about Mitch Trubisky. How about that?
Shots fired.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, shots fired.
Understandable, man. I don't think there'll be too much of that going on here, but maybe we're talking about drafting his replacement as a possibility.
That will probably be a possibility. Hey, Arif, I know you were down in Mobile 2 weeks ago at the Senior Bowl, and so we're just kind of talking about some of the players. We had a recap show last week, and kind of start off this show here tonight, recapping some of the players that caught our eye, and we talked about impressing us, and I'm going back now and just kind of after watching those practices and jotting down names that I haven't actually looked at yet, and going back and kind of delving into some more tape. So I presume you're probably doing the same thing. So my question to you is, like, what are the players or player that caught your eye the most in that week of practices or even in the game, and who has you now going back and diving into tape and looking up at what they can do?
Yeah, I think I'll go with the easy answer here. Because he's a receiver, he gets the ball. It's very easy to pay attention to these kinds of guys. But Denzel Mims from Baylor. I'm sure you covered him in the recap show. He was kind of one of the most popular talkers after the Senior Bowl. I don't know that he had as much production in the game as he did at the practices, but we kind of know that the practices have a lot more in terms of information they can give you and what they do to affect draft stock. And the thing about him is I didn't really expect him to be great against press. He's playing in the Big 12, didn't see a ton of press coverage. I didn't expect him to be a great route runner because he wasn't asked to run too many routes, but he actually did both of those things really well at the Senior Bowl. And so then the next question is, when you go back and look at the Baylor offense, does he show some of these traits that, maybe you overlooked that you saw in a lot of detail down at the Senior Bowl? And if he doesn't, what's the difference here? Are these just kind of temporary improvements? It takes a lot to get these sorts of things into muscle memory. And so you might be evaluating the wrong prospect if you're only looking at what he does at the Senior Bowl. But I think, from what I've seen of the Baylor stuff, there's, I think, a lot there. It's unfortunately a super stacked receiver class, unfortunately for him. So It'll be difficult to kind of move up, even if his tape looks a little bit better than I initially expected. But he's a guy that I would certainly be excited about. I think he's projected to go around the third round. I think in a lot of other draft classes, you'd probably see him around the second round. So he's a guy that first name I thought of when you said, hey, who do you want to take a look at?
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because Mims is a guy that actually we didn't bring up last week. My top receiver down there was Van Jefferson, the kid from Florida. However, Mims, coming into the week, I've been like hot or cold on him. There's times where I watch his tape and I see the get off at the line of scrimmage. I see him be able to, like you said, get by that press corner with some speed, some quickness, get open downfield and make the catch. But then there's times where, he doesn't get off the press as quickly as I want him to, or I like him to. There's times where he double catches the ball or uses his torso to kind of corral in the catch. So that's definitely a guy doing to do some more tape study on. I know one of our Bears Barroom contributors, Barlissimo, is high on Denzel Mims as well. So it's curious that was the first name you brought up. So is there anybody else that impressed you down there, or now if not, then who kind of hurt their stock, if you will, in your eyes?
Well, sure. Let's talk a little bit about both of that. I think so. As a Vikings guy, I'm always looking at offensive linemen. Ever since I started covering the team, it seems like that's always been a need. So I looked at Ben Barch from St. John's, a local guy, Division III guy. Reminds me a little bit of Ellie Hobart, who ended up getting drafted, I think, in the second round of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Also a Division III guy. His stock rose really significantly at the Senior Bowl, and I was really impressed by what Barch was able to do. So I knew that he'd probably be athletic. I knew he was a former tight end that converted, mostly actually to get playing time. It wasn't really like, the coaches, recruited him as a tight end, but secretly wanted him to be a tackle the whole time. But he turned into a really monstrously good tackle. He's got all the tools, but the thing that struck me as really interesting is that, you expect a Senior Bowl invitee, especially a Division III guy, to have tools. What struck me is that he played with a lot of balance. His pass sets, I thought, really looked professional grade. And it turns out he's been working with Paul Alexander, former Bengals and Dallas Cowboys offensive line coach. But he looked really smooth and natural at offensive tackle, which, a lot of these position converts, they don't do that right away. So he's a guy that I was also impressed with. And then, in terms of people I was kind of disappointed with, I'll stick with the offensive line because, again, I looked there the most. Nick Harris from Washington. Now, I still think he's a pretty high-level center, but I'm looking a lot at these, ridiculously good athletes for the Vikings because the way they want to implement their wide zone scheme asks a lot athletically of these players, and so you might be able to get away with, maybe they're not quite as good at drive blocking, as much sand in the pants in terms of anchor. Maybe they're not as great in straight drop back pass protection. So Nick Harris was definitely a guy I wanted to look in that regard, but he was really disappointing the entire week. And again, they didn't ask him to do the stuff that the Vikings would ask him to do, but you still want, even knowing that you've got a little bit more latitude there, you want even more strength than he was able to show. I thought he got beat up at the line of scrimmage a lot. Now in the team drills, he actually looked mostly fine. Centers tend to get a lot of help. In one-on-one drills, he looked pretty poor, but it does limit what you can do from a flexibility perspective. And for the Vikings, I was really looking at whether or not, any of these great interior athletes could be guards. And it's very clear he cannot be a guard. He needs to be a center, and he needs, in particular, to be one with help.
Yeah, I agree with you on both players there. Barch was a guy by the end of the week scouts were just raving about. That's a guy, to be honest with you, I have never heard of, before coming down to Mobile. And that's definitely a guy I've earmarked to dig into some of his tape. But, talking about Barch, coming from that, St. John's, he didn't look like he was overmatched. There was times in the one-on-ones where he got a little bit nasty and started throwing some guys around, which I love seeing in my offensive linemen. And even if his measurables, he came in about 6'5", almost 6'6", 380 pounds, with 33-inch arms. So he's got the height and the length, if you will, to probably possibly play left tackle. Although I think predominantly he'll probably end up inside a guard, but definitely a guy, a good call with Ben Barch in terms of popping and opening eyes of scouts and everyone else there. And in terms of Nick Harris, short, undersized center, but that guy's got a bulldog mentality. Guy's always tenacious, going after his blockers. I think he got a little bit overmatched in a one-on-one, so I think that's not where you can kind of see him kind of shine. I think you kind of nailed it there in terms of zone blocking scheme where he works in tandem with his other offensive linemen to kind of be able to create seal off defenders, create those creases, those gaps for running backs. So I think that's where he's going to be able to excel. But yeah, two good guys there, two good names again, with Barch and Nick Harris.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I've been spending a lot of time looking at these offensive linemen. So these guys were. I thought it was a fairly interesting kind of mixed group there at the offensive line. I think in previous years you've had better names come in at the offensive line, but it ended up being a pretty good group.
I'm just curious in terms of Josh Jones from Houston. That's a guy that I had earmarked actually for the Bears at pick 43. The kid from Houston, about 6'5", 311 pounds. But I think he's done so well, or he did so well down in Mobile, that now I'm seeing his name being bandied about in mid, like top 15 in terms of the first round, which is like a gigantic jump in my opinion. But did you have a chance to dive into any of Josh Jones, the tackle from Houston's tape yet?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he played both tackle and both guard positions there in Mobile, at least in practices. I thought he played tremendously. I don't know that I would put him in the top 15 given just how incredible his tackle class is. And, if you've got a choice between, say, like Jedrick Wills and Josh Jones, I think Jones is a fantastic prospect. But I don't know that he would be kind of a top 15 guy just because, just like with Denzel Mims, it's a difficult class to kind of break through. But yeah, I thought he played like a first-round player. I don't know that he'll go in the first round. I think that he looked really natural at tackle. I wouldn't be surprised if he got shifted inside to guard. He would be a really athletic guard if that's the case, and he looked fairly natural at guard. I think when he played on the right side, it looked maybe a little bit less impressive, but he also had his most impressive rep there when he torched Jason Strowbridge aside. I thought he had a really great week too. I almost brought him up instead of Barch, honestly, because he had maybe even a better week just in terms of where he's going to end up landing as a result of it.
With Jones, what I love about him is his athletic ability, his ability to get downfield on screens and be able to kind of set, be able to lead for a running back downfield. And he plays with some attitude. And I love my offensive linemen, and I love the guys that play with a nasty mean streak. And he's got some of that in him. And that's why I was kind of hoping to earmark him at 43 for the Bears. But, we'll see what happens on draft night. But that's definitely a kid that increases stock down in Mobile.
Yeah, so Arif, I'm going to kind of point the focus a little bit more to the quarterbacks, and specifically more to the quarterbacks you like in the draft and don't like. Obviously we don't want to touch on them all because we'll be here all night, and I'm sure none of us want to do that. But, at least maybe give me your top 2 that you like, top 2 you don't like, and, where you could see them falling.
You mean among the quarterbacks at Mobile?
Oh, sure. From the Senior Bowl would be great.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that, I think everyone kind of agrees that Justin Herbert had a really great showing throughout the week at the Senior Bowl, and I think that's the case. I would probably move him up a little bit on my board. I don't know that I'd put him anywhere above 2 or anything like that, but I thought he had a really great week. I thought he was able to process pretty quickly, which is really nice. Even though they weren't presenting super complex coverages or anything like that. The interesting question comes up with somebody like Jordan Love, who has, this is kind of just like a setup for him. He's supposed to look good here. His tools are really tremendous, and what Mobile does is it makes these toolsy quarterbacks that maybe have some difficulty with accuracy or even more importantly, difficulty with reads, look a little bit better than they are. He had a really great week. I don't know that he answered any of my questions, unfortunately. So I don't know that I would move Jordan Love based off of what he did here in Mobile, except to basically confirm that the tools that he had. So that's kind of an interesting case.
Yeah. Do
you think Love goes in the first round, Arif?
I think he does. I think that we've seen enough toolsy project quarterbacks that have had at least one good year in college. And I think that his struggles in 2019 are a little bit overblown, which is not to say that he didn't struggle. But his 2018 tape is really good. People do pay a lot of attention to that, especially at quarterback. I think that kind of what he has to offer is difficult to find. I wouldn't be shocked if he won in the first round. Plus, there's a ton of quarterback availability this year in the league. And so there's going to be a lot of teams trying to find ways to get quarterbacks either for this year or for next year and maybe sit him and develop him a little bit. So I could see that. But yeah, he looked fine. He didn't hurt his stock, which I think is really important. The Colorado quarterback, I think it's Montez or something like that.
Montez, yeah.
Yeah, he definitely hurt his stock.
Agreed.
He's somebody he's somebody that I thought struggled throughout the week. Really looked poor. Gave receivers pretty good reps to have some pretty impressive looking catches on the resume. So it's always nice to have that. As a pure quarterback prospect, I wouldn't say that I love what he put together. I did like the Wazoo quarterback in the game. I don't know that I liked what he put together in practices. I love quarterbacks with super fast releases, and he's got a crazy fast release. It's really nice to see. I think he might even whip it a little bit too close to his face and rob him of some power. But that's not enough to overcome some of the other stuff.
Sure.
I thought he was just kind of a little bit late, and he gets away with it with that fast release. I think the arm is an issue. I think he's kind of willing to check it down a lot. Again, in the game, he looked great. But here, I thought he probably improved his stock. He might have turned an undraftable grade into a draftable one. That's always nice to see. But definitely, again, not enough. And then Shea Patterson, to me, is somebody, it's kind of funny. He's somebody that I would say, based off of Mobile, would improve his grade the most. But also, I still don't think he's draftable, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah, he looked, mechanically, he looked so much better. But who cares? He's still not super accurate, and he's not making great decisions. So, all right.
Yeah. Montez, for me, came in with a late round grade, and after Mobile, and for me, he's undraftable, at least from my perspective. And then I think you were talking about Anthony Gordon in terms of his quick release, and that's a kid that, for me, has grown on me as the season went on. Now, he's a guy that I did a mock draft last weekend and just using strictly for the Bears, using strictly guys that were down in Mobile. And I had him in the to the Bears at pick 149, which is in the 5th round. So I think that's a good area to develop a nice young developmental prospect. But like I said, I love his release. I love the way he manipulates his arm angle to find those passing windows. And but that 199, his weight when he weighed in, I think the whole the whole auditorium there kind of just like, what, 199 at quarterback? That guy's gonna get killed. So that definitely is an issue for him. He's gonna have to. I talked to him during the practices. He said he's trying to get to 210 and 215 by the combine. So we'll see if that happens. And the other thing is just a 1-year starter. So that's going to be some of the knocks on him. But if you can get him in the later rounds, I think he's a nice developmental prospect. But yeah, and Patterson, yeah, I agree with you, man. He's a kid that he's got those tools. He'll make some plays here and there. You're like, oh, this guy's got something here going, and all of a sudden he'll throw into triple coverage and the ball's picked off, or he'll airmail a ball or something like that. So yeah, I totally agree on your quarterback assessment there as well.
He had me duped in that practice, right, Danny? Because I turned to Danny and I said, man, I don't know why, but for some reason I like Shea Patterson. And probably 6 passes later, I was like, I must have been on drugs.
Well, that's what it does. He makes a play or two, and you're like, all right, this guy's got some tools that you can work with. And then next thing you know, he does what he typically did in his college career, and he makes some plays that has you scratching your head. So that's why I think I don't think he gets drafted, but I think he's going to be a guy that's going to get invited to camp and he'll be given a chance. But there's going to be some offensive coordinator or some quarterback coach out there, things they're going to be able to fix him. So we'll see what happens with him.
Yeah, Arif, we got a question in the chat for you. Moving more towards your Vikings. So among the high-priced veterans on the Vikings roster, who do you believe they will cut to create cap space? Just, as we're curious if maybe the Bears would target any of those cap casualties.
Well, this is probably not going to end up being a Bears target, but I think it's pretty clear that Xavier Rhodes is a cut for the Vikings. He costs something like $13.2 million. Cutting him frees up about $8.1 million in cap space, so that's something that they need to do. They're already $11 million underneath the cap, so they really need to cut just to get to even. Much less signing a draft class and signing free agents and signing their own guys back again. So he's an immediate cut. I don't think the Bears would be super interested in targeting him. They tend to have kind of more fluid. Not incredibly fluid, but more fluid, defensive backs. So I don't know that he's a great fit. Somebody that might be a good fit, even though the Bears already have like a really, really good nose tackle, but somebody to maybe consider is Linval Joseph, who might be a cut. I thought he played actually pretty well, but his contract is just so bloated that it's difficult to justify keeping him. I like him a lot. I'm kind of hearing, maybe other people don't like him as much in terms of kind of whether or not it makes sense to keep him on the team. Again, he played well. The Vikings do have a backup nose tackle in Armon Watts that they drafted this last year that played really well. And so there's the option there. And then the other thing is, and this is kind of the big question, is whether or not Everson Griffin is willing to take a really substantial pay cut to stay with the team, because, the team stuck through him through a lot of the difficulties that he's had, not just, 2 seasons ago, but throughout his career. The team has stuck by him, and so the team means a lot to him. He's got his family here. But, as an aging defensive end who dropped off in the second half of the season, great first half of the season, dropped off in the second half of the season, plus kind of a potential rising starter in Afadio Denabo, he's somebody that might end up being a cut. If he's not a cut, he might take a substantial pay cut. If he is a cut, I think that he would be a really phenomenal kind of rotational third down only kind of guy. For any team. I think the Bears could definitely use him. I'm not too impressed with Leonard Floyd, so having Everson Griffin, who could also rush from the inside too, available on third downs would probably be pretty big. Other than that, I don't know that there is a super obvious cut. There's been talks about Kyle Rudolph, but I don't love the tight end situation there, because David Morgan's injury is kind of this ever-present question. He never saw the field, so they wouldn't really have anyone outside of Irv Smith. And, there've been some rumors about trading Stephon Diggs and stuff like that. I don't think the Bears would have the ammo to be able to trade for Stephon Diggs. Right. But B, I don't think necessarily that receiver is the issue on that offense.
Yeah, that's
so curious. I'm sorry, Ryan, but curious with Rhodes. Is it just the talent that is it the injuries catching up to him? Is it his? Because I see a lot of times, just from afar here, obviously, a lot of him getting into with his teammates on the sidelines is just his demeanor with his teammates, or is it just all of the above?
The demeanor doesn't help. And this is a really good kind of contrast. I was just talking about Stephon Diggs, so he's always blowing up on the sidelines too, right? And the team like kind of just doesn't care. Like when you ask after games, either the coach or, players in the locker room, they're like, oh, yeah, Diggs? No, he does that all the time. Why are you asking about it? Right. But when Rhodes does it, Zimmer's like, well, we got to keep that under control. You can't do that. And he benched Rhodes for a while just because of a sideline blow up. Mind you, that occurred after he got burned, which is when these things usually happen. So you could have benched him for maybe a couple of reasons. But you mentioned it was kind of a disciplinary benching in the game for a sideline blow up. So that doesn't help. But I think the primary reason is that the talent doesn't seem to be there. I wouldn't be surprised if kind of Zimmer was in his corner, but not many other people were. The fact that there's a new defensive backs coach with the Vikings kind of makes it difficult for Rhodes to kind of rely on having multiple people in his corner that have worked with him. And so his talent has just kind of dropped off. I think it's probably because of injury. He, at what was it, 215 pounds at the combine, ran like a 4.42, just a remarkable speed for a cornerback at his size. And so he was this really great corner with all these developmental tools. I mean, he didn't have like the greatest quickness in the world, but he had explosion, speed, length, everything. And then his speed started going away. And as a corner, you can have explosion, length, speed, and agility. You can maybe lose one of those things. But if you lose two of those things, you're toast, right? Because receivers can choose how they want to beat you, or teams can choose which receiver to match up against you most of the time. And so if you don't have multiple ways to defend, there's not much you can do. And it looks like his speed has just fallen off in a really huge way, and the Vikings have tried protecting him all year. So I think the injuries have caught up to him, and he's tried to make up for it by being grabby, which worked from a lot at Florida State. They had to trade him out of it when he was a rookie. That worked for a while, but now he's getting frustrated again, and he's creating penalties too. So I think there's kind of a few things in play here for Rhodes.
The next question I have is actually more towards Mike Zimmer. Obviously making the playoffs, Zimmer looks to be secure in his job, but you've seen the Vikings here in the Zimmer era, have a good year, bad year, good year, bad year, miss the playoffs, make the playoffs, miss the playoffs, make the playoffs. Wouldn't you want to see some consistency, and do you think ownership wants to see that too?
Well, yeah, I think it'd be nice to have consistency. I don't know that the coaching is the issue, though, is the problem, because he's a 600 coach, right? He's won 6 out of every 10 games. That's, I think, 5th most of active coaches, maybe 7th now that McCarthy has been rehired. But he's got an incredible winning percentage. If you take a look at every coach that's active right now that has a better winning percentage, they have like a Hall of Fame quarterback, right? They've got Tom Brady or Drew Brees or Aaron Rodgers, right? And then you've got Zimmer, who's had 5 different starting quarterbacks. So like I don't know, that's really impressive to me. And the fact that they've had to, they dealt with like Teddy, his injury, and then they had to trade for Sam Bradford right away, get him ready within like 2 weeks of him showing up. I think what he's done is really impressive. They've lost 2 offensive coordinators to head coaching jobs and 2 offensive coordinators to being fairly incompetent. And so the consistency issue is when they're successful, they get poached, and when they're not, the tools aren't there to kind of build on those members of the coaching staff. So I think it's, you don't have a quarterback, you don't have an offensive coordinator. I don't know that any of that is really his fault, except for initially hiring Norv Turner was not apparently a great idea. You could probably forgive him for that. Beyond that, I don't know that he's really made a ton of decisions that make me think he's the problem, because the reason they're getting into the playoffs with like Case Keenum and having to start Sean Hill and Matt Castle and whoever as backups over time. To me, that's impressive. I don't know if the Wilfs see it the same way. I suspect they kind of do, because they really scrambled after those rumors came out that the Vikings were going to potentially fire him if he lost the Saints game. They really scrambled in a way that made me think that they value kind of having one head coach for a while. Sure. So I think they see it the same way, but I personally am very impressed with what Zimmer's done, given that rotating cast of quarterback and offensive coordinator.
Before I turn it back over to Danny, just 1 second. I had one more question, and I wanted to speak to you in regards to John DeFilippo, who the Bears now have just brought in as their quarterbacks coach, and get your thoughts on his time there.
Certainly media friendly. I'll say that. He was really great as somebody in a press room to try and get answers from. But in terms of his performance as an offensive coordinator, he wasn't very good at all. I wouldn't say that translates in any meaningful way to being a quarterback's coach. It's just kind of how coaching works. You're really good at a job, and then you get promoted to do a completely different job, which, I mean, it's like every level of coaching works that way, right? And so the fact that he seemed to be a really good quarterback's coach in Philadelphia didn't translate into being an offensive coordinator in Jacksonville or Minnesota. The problem, what's interesting to me, and you know, maybe I'll dial back my praise of Zimmer for a second. Zimmer seemed to have fired him for what to me seemed to be two reasons. One, that he threw the ball too much, and two, that he seemed a little bit too prepared to jump to kind of a head coaching gig. And the second one I can't really speak to. To me, I think Zimmer's a little bit too old school with regards to people attempting to kind of to jump ship, although, again, that's happened to him a couple of times. But the first one, the issue with him is not that he threw the ball too much. Probably is fine. The issue is that he was not a very good play caller when he was throwing the ball. I mean, the pass plays were designed really poorly, really used Stephon Diggs in particular really poorly, had the shortest route depth of any of the receivers on the roster, and that includes Laquan Treadwell, who should not be like running deep by any reasonable stretch of the imagination.
Right.
He just wasn't designing a really good offense around Cousins. So the plays that they were calling, very, very poorly designed. Often isolating, a receiver without, using their capabilities to kind of split coverages and stuff like that, and putting Cousins into really difficult situations in terms of how his reads would go. So I didn't think he was a particularly good offensive coordinator. He seems to be a pretty good quarterbacks coach, though, so I wouldn't really read it one way or the other.
Yeah, and we saw the Bears bringing him in, and I think we were all pretty excited to get him in as a quarterback coach. Versus, somebody maybe involved in some of the play calling and hopefully somebody that really can work with Mitch and, right the ship or correct the ship or, however the term should be. Well, Arif, we've taken up, almost, I want to say over 30 minutes of your time, man. And we can't thank you enough for joining us tonight on Draft on Tap. What we like to do before we let our guests go is give a little bit of promotion of what you got going on, where our listeners can find you and interact with you. And then we'll let you go, man.
Yeah, sure. I'm about to submit an article to my editor about an XFL preview. So, players to watch and stuff like that. So that games start on Saturday. So, if you're interested in that, check it out. But as you know, I primarily cover the Vikings at The Athletic, at theathletic.com/author/Arif Hasan. You can follow me on Twitter at Arif Hasan NFL. I've also got a pair of podcasts, the Zone Coverage Football Machine, where we cover both the Vikings and the NFL at large, and Norse Code, which is hosted the SB Nation site Daily Norseman, which primarily talks about the Vikings. So you can follow me there anywhere. I try to get guests on, especially as we get closer to draft season, to try and get kind of more informed perspectives.
Awesome.
Hey, Arif, you brought up a good point here, the XFL, and something that we haven't talked about here. And, going over some of these rosters, I'm just curious what your thoughts are. There's some pretty good talent, I think, on some of these rosters. And, if you kind of, I think there's only 8 or 10 franchises, but if you go through the rosters, there's a lot of guys that are first round picks, guys who are, starting in the NFL, guys that are, 5 to 10 years of NFL experience. So your overall thought on this rebirth, if you will, of the XFL and how you think this is going to go ahead and whether it has a chance to succeed. We've seen other leagues try and the most recent one, the AAF, try and fail. You think this rebirth has a chance to succeed?
Yeah, I think the fact that they've got deals with major broadcast partners will be aired on mainstream networks instead of BR Live or something like that is really good for them. But also, yeah, I really like these rosters. I mean, you've got quarterbacks like Cardale Jones and Matt McGloin and BJ Daniels, Aaron Murray. People that for a while, were really exciting to have that you thought maybe could start. I really like the skill talent they have. Simi Cobbs, Jarrell Presley, Rashad Ross, just on one team alone, is pretty fun to see. You've got like Joe Horn Jr. and Tio Redding, and guys that if you followed college football, you were pretty excited about their production potential. Andre Williams, former Heisman contender. Keenan Reynolds, another former Heisman contender, converted to receiver. A lot of really interesting guys. Reese Horn, who played a lot of his career in Europe, but he's a super athlete, played at the University of Indianapolis, which I think is an NAIA school. That I think it's going to be kind of an offensive explosion, which people might want to see. It's a hurry up style, so there's a shorter play clock, so you have to get plays out faster. There's going to be a variety of different offensive styles, which you saw in the AAF, you don't see in the NFL. I fundamentally think it's a good product. I don't know. The AAF collapsed, I think, for a lot of reasons. A lot of them kind of internal that I don't see with the XFL. So I don't know that this will be a necessarily an obvious success or anything like that, but I think it's more set up to succeed in clearer ways than the AAF was, and I'm really excited to see how it goes.
Cool. Yeah, me too. I'm real excited to check out the product.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Arif, for joining us tonight, man. And it was a pleasure to have you on. And, as we get closer to the draft, man, maybe we could hook up again, once you've got all your tape study done and whatnot as we're approaching. It'd be awesome to have you on.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to be on.
Awesome.
Thanks again, Arif.
Thanks, man. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too.
Well, man, another great guest, Danny, and, we can't thank Arif enough for coming on and joining us tonight here on Draft on Tap. And before Arif joined us, Danny, we were kind of recapping your draft from last week, and we left off with Bryson Hopkins out of Purdue, and we will quickly go through the remainder of those picks. And, I love what you did for the first pick in the 5th round, and that was going to be none other than Bradley Anae, the edge out of Utah, a 3-sack performance in the Senior Bowl. And Aldo and I got to speak with him after the game, and just seems like a great guy, and what a game he had and a great week of practice as well, right, Danny?
Yeah, I mean, this is a kid definitely. If you watch his career at Utah, productive kid. He was consistently around the ball. Getting in the backfield. Creating pressures, creating turnovers with forced fumbles. So, the kid's got solid size, about 6'3", almost 260 pounds. And one thing about him, and when you watch his tape, this kid's got a nonstop motor. He plays to the whistle. He's got a solid first step. Get off of the line of scrimmage. Does a nice job. He's got those strong hands. When he punches, when he gets the chest of an offensive lineman, he knocks him back. He rocks him back. So he's got some of that power in his arms, in his hands. I've seen a lot of in terms of pass rush repertoire. I've seen him use a swim move, a rip move, a swipe, a grip and pull. Again, showing some of that refined technique and also some of that strength, that strong hands to be able to grab an offensive lineman's jersey and just rip him and pull him down to the ground. So, definitely a guy that has some shortcomings in terms of athletic ability. So it's not a quick twitch guy like you see out some of these premier edge rushers, be. However, I think what he does is he brings, like I said, all out effort, solid play strength, and he has a good idea in terms of how to get past an offensive lineman, how to win with leverage, and how to get into the backfield. So again, if you pick up a guy that can be, like we talked about earlier, a situational pass rusher here in the 5th round, that's a guy that's going to play a lot. Yeah, he might not be a starter because when you line him up and you run at him, it's hard for him to kind of get off the blocks and be a solid run defender at this moment. Now, obviously, I think he's going to has a chance to improve as the years go on. But in terms of bringing him in next year, you got a guy who can be a possible situational pass rusher here in the 5th round. I think that's a solid pickup.
Yeah, I mean we had some Leonard Floyd chat and Arif brought him up earlier. We heard Ryan Pace in his end-of-season press conference say how great Leonard Floyd plays the run. Well, if you can get an A and he can rush the passer on 3rd down, now you can pay Leonard Floyd, I don't know, what is it, 11 to 13 million to just play the run.
If you can combine Anae's pass rushing ability, his strong hands, his play strength, and his all-out hustle with Leonard Floyd's body and his ability to play the run, I think you'd have one heck of a defensive player there. So the combination of the two might do the job. Playing opposite of Khalil Mack, but Definitely a guy you bring him in, and like I said, in the 5th round, a guy who can contribute right away to you. I'm assuming, as a situational pass rusher, bring some of that edge pressure off the edge there. So definitely intrigued me, coming into the season. Like, Utah's been developing some terrific athletes and prospects there, and bringing them to the NFL. So, you watch his tape, he always pops on tape. You always see him making a play. So he's not a guy that just had a great week at the Senior Bowl, just had a great Senior Bowl game. You watch his tape and he's consistent. He's out there. He's always making plays. So I've become a big fan of Bradley Anae.
Yeah, I speaking to him after the game, and definitely a big fan. I definitely agree with you there, Danny. Moving on to the second pick of the 5th round, number 149 overall, and that is where you chose Antonio Gibson, wide receiver.
Yeah, we kind of talked about him.
Yeah,
kind of talked about him earlier with the show.
Yep.
Receiver who wants to play running back. Just a guy, quick twitch guy, get the ball in his hands. He can make people miss in the open field. Just one of those, we're talking about adding speed to the skill position group here. And then this is a guy, like I said, can be a running back, can be a receiver, can be a threat out of the backfield. Tony Pollard, his teammate from last year, went to the Cowboys, I believe, also in the 5th round. He had a pretty good rookie season, if you will, contributing as Ezekiel Elliott's backup. So this is a kid similar, in terms of being able to create some mismatches coming out of the backfield, especially on like those wheel routes, even lining up in a slot and matching him up, against, a corner, maybe not, as big as him, because, Gibson's about 6 feet, 223 pounds. So, and he has got that speed to be able to create some over the top separation. But again, just a guy, get the ball in his hands, a playmaker, just find creative ways. And again, help you on special teams in terms of kickoff return. So, you bring in a backup to Cordell Patterson. Sure. In case he goes down, you have a guy that can step in and be just as dangerous, as Patterson. So this is where, again, you're using your 5th round pick here to bring in guys that have specific skill sets, specific things you could use and utilize, at the next level. Obviously, when you get into day 3 of the draft, you're looking at positions where you're drafting for traits. You're drafting players that you can bring in, and you can kind of visualize them in your system, in your schemes, utilizing their talents and how you can bring the best out of them. And with Bradley Anae, his pass rushing ability, with Antonio Gibson, his ability to make people miss and create big plays on offense, and bring some of that speed element along with the return ability.
Yeah, and I couldn't have said it better. I thought he had a great week, Danny, just from things that I saw on Twitter and then in the game. I thought he played very well. But moving on to pick 149 of the 5th round, that is where you selected Anthony Gordon, the quarterback from Washington State. I know we've talked a lot about him over the last month or so on this show and some other shows. But great pickup with that last pick in the 5th round.
Yeah, like you said, we've talked about him a lot. He's a kid that I keep saying that just kind of grew on me as the season progressed. He wasn't in my top 10 initially in preseason quarterbacks. Again, this was his first year as a starter, having backed up Gardner Minshew last year. As you kept watching him, and again, every quarterback in that Washington State, Mike Leach offense, they put up numbers, they put up stats, whether it's yards, touchdowns, or whatever. The thing about him is just his feel in the pocket for me. His ability to throw receivers open, to throw away from coverage. He makes some NFL type throws. Are there some red flags? Yes, there are some red flags, but he's got that lightning quick release that we just talked about with Arif. He noticed it down there in Mobile as well. He's got that lightning quick release. He's got the ability, like I said, to throw receivers open. He's got a feel for the passing game, which is key for these young quarterbacks. He's got quick feet in the pocket. You look at his feet when he's back there. He looks like he's got happy feet. They're all over the place. Yep. However, he's got like this quiet confidence in himself that he can get himself in a position where his feet look like they're going all over the place, but then he'll get settled down, he'll get balanced, and he'll be able to throw a decent, accurate ball. And I like the way he flicks the ball off his hands. Nice clean spiral. So, and we talked about him being able to manipulate his arm angles to be able to find those passing lanes, those passing windows. Something that we see, quarterbacks do nowadays in the NFL, guys like Patrick Mahomes and stuff like that. And a lot of that has to do with them playing baseball, as part of their youth, growing up as well. And when speaking with Gordon, he did confirm that, playing baseball was some of helped him, if you will, with that arm angle, being able to, manipulate it and, throw sidearm or whatnot and get the ball to where he needs to get it to. So, and he's shown some leadership ability, watching some of those games, if a receiver runs the wrong route or a receiver is not at the spot you anticipate him being there, he has no problems getting on his receiver and making sure he knows that he wants him in that spot. So, stuff like that is you watch over, his tapes, and again, you have to, glance over those stats. Those stats are going to be mind-boggling, and that's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at just him, projecting him with his traits, at the next level, taking, Matt Nagy taking him and kind of, molding him into a starting caliber NFL quarterback. So there's a lot of debate on Gordon. Obviously the 1 year, like we mentioned, the 1 year starting experience is a knock.
Yep.
The 199 pounds, coming in is a big red flag. I don't think a kid can play quarterback in the NFL weighing only 199 pounds. So again, we talked about he's working with a strength and conditioning coach, and he's looking to be about 210, 214 in that range at the NFL Combine. So again, some areas there where you kind of have some concerns. However, but you're bringing this kid in as a 5th round pick, a guy that's clearly going to have a shot to win a backup position and possibly be a third stringer on your roster.
And then moving on to the only pick in I believe the 6th round, is at number 177 is Kindle Vildor, the cornerback from Georgia Southern. Really impressed with him, Danny, in the practice that I saw and then in the game as well. Your thoughts on Vildor?
Yeah, Vildor was obviously a kid I did not have much tape on coming into the Senior Bowl, and then kind of watched him as the week progressed. Start off a little bit shaky, if you will, but it's kind of anticipate that because he is doing a big bump up here in competition in terms of what he's faced throughout his college career, and now what he's facing now down in Mobile. So, but a kid at 5'11", 185 pounds, good athlete with solid size, for a corner, plays with nice bend in his stance. The guy looks like he's a flexible athlete, quick feet with those oily hips. This is a guy that can flip his hips open at the line of scrimmage and can mirror off the snap and press coverage. He's got that lateral agility to be able to keep pace with those, quick slot receivers on those two-way go routes. Quick out of his transition. This guy can click his heels, plant them in the ground, and quickly come downhill and transition in terms of being a run support guy. He can stay in phase downfield. Like I said, he's got that foot speed and athletic ability and that body control to be able to make plays on the ball. And make plays on the ball is what he did throughout his college career. He had 25 passes defense in his first career, to go along with nine interceptions. So as a guy that gets his hands on the ball, and it is in the area, in the vicinity of a receiver to be able to go ahead and make a play. So, obviously corner is going to, in my opinion, is going to be a need position, whether they attack it in free agency or whether they attack it in the draft was yet to be determined. But, Vildor is a kid that really impressed me. The other kid that really impressed me was Tony Pry Jr. from Notre Dame, but I think he's more in that 3rd round range, possibly maybe 2nd round. We'll see how that all shapes up, but he's not going to be somewhere that the Bears are going to be able to get him again, unless they trade down and whatnot. So, but that's why I saw Vildor as a target for me here for the Bears in the 6th round, a developmental kid who can come in, he's got the traits, got the athletic ability to play corner. And that's why I picked him here at 177.
And the last pick for the Bears in the draft at number 211, you decided to go with Courtney Davis, the wide receiver from Texas A&M.
Yeah, I really like this kid. And what I liked about him when I first put on his tape is he's got that quickness. He's got that, for me, he's more quicker than fast receiver. And again, I've been talking about getting the ball and, getting more speed on offense, getting the ball in these playmakers' hands and let them do their thing. But when I went down to Mobile and I watched Davis play, he looked faster in person. So, and I know he's been working with a speed and conditioning coach. So, he might, that might just been something that he's been working on, and now he just looks quicker and more faster. But that's what I saw. And I was talking to some of his trainers, and they told me that he's going to run a 4.3 at the combine. So, again, what he runs at the combine and what he runs on pads, on film, it's two different things. However, watching him down there in Mobile live in person, he looks not only quick, but also looks fast. So this is a kid, like I said, this is a deep receiver class. There's going to be kids in the 6th, 7th round that's going to be able to get drafted and come in and make contributions. Heck, they might even be undrafted free agents that are going to make rosters at receiver and become contributors, down the line. So this is a really deep receiver class. If you get a kid like Courtney Davis in the 7th round, I think that's going to be a steal. The kid is fearless going over the middle. In the at Senior Bowl practices, I mean, pretty much one-on-one, he was pretty much unguardable. There were a couple of plays that you and I were in that end zone area where he was being guarded by a corner, and he just literally, his release off the line of scrimmage was so quick, so fast. He had 3 steps on the corner and already had separation, and it was an easy touchdown pass to him. So kid is, like I said, lightning quick. I envision him more of a slot guy, even though he's about 6'1", 200 pounds. He could probably play a little bit outside, but for now, I like to line him up in the slot and let him do his thing there. Again, just get the ball in his hands, a guy that can make people miss in the open field. That's why I figured, 7th round here, we'll take a shot with a kid that could be a nice playmaker for the Bears on offense.
Yeah, and we've got some more audio from the Senior Bowl. First, I'm going to play you the interview that Danny did with Anthony Jennings out of Alabama, and then we'll wrap it up with Juwan Jennings from Tennessee, who Danny and I both thought was a phenomenal interview. So here is Anthony Jennings from Alabama.
We're here with Anthony Jennings from Alabama. So how's the week been going on so far for you?
It's been going well. I'm trying to play a lot of different positions, show my versatility. I feel pretty good about it. For it to be my first time. Just having fun, being around a bunch of great coaches and great players. So glad to be here.
Yeah, I noticed that they've got you inside linebacker, something that you wanted to try, or the coaches wanted to have you there? Or?
I mean, they felt like from watching me that I can play it, so they wanted to take a shot at it, and I'm just glad that I feel like I can do it. Just need a little more work at it. That's what I've been doing this week, so
But you're more comfortable as an outside edge guy?
I mean, yeah, definitely. I played that my whole college career, so I pretty much can do that. I can still work on some things up, but just try a new position and we'll see how they go.
So that was Anthony Jennings, and great interview to speak with him. The one thing, playing at Alabama, he's played in some big games, Danny, without a shadow of a doubt. What did you think of his week at the Senior Bowl and how well he performed?
Well, for Jennings, when I first went down there and I saw him listed as an inside linebacker, and I'm like, wait, okay, that's a little bit weird because, I had him as an edge guy coming into the season, and I think he finished, I believe, 7th overall in terms of one of my edge prospects. So, but I think I know why they have him playing inside. He's came in at around 6'1", 6'2", with about 32-inch arms, so he might not have the necessary length they see him to be successful on the edge. So they probably saw some athletic traits that they can move him inside and place him inside linebacker. So I think as an inside linebacker, he didn't really stick out in terms of didn't really make plays, didn't really show some of the instincts you look for. At least I look for my inside linebackers, but that could be understood because this kid just went from playing edge outside backer to playing inside linebacker. So that could be something there, but. For me, if you bring this kid in, he's an edge guy, and you let him out, let him play out there on the edge, and you let him make plays, and that's what I did at Alabama. I think he finished his career with, I believe it was 14 and a half sacks. He really just started playing his last 2 seasons there. He had 8 sacks this year, 5.5 sacks last year. 33 and a half tackles for loss. So he's a kid that gets penetration, gets into the backfield, and flashes and be able to make some plays. So. We'll see how it goes, but I was a little bit surprised initially when I saw him lined up at inside linebacker. But we'll see how it goes in terms of when you translate him to the next level.
And here's your interview with Juwan Jennings, Danny, and then we'll talk a little bit about our, the conversation we had with him and, what transpired before we interviewed him.
So, how's your week been going so far?
It's been going great, meeting these phenomenal guys, a lot of great coaches, just being able to get coaching from NFL team, man, it's amazing, and I'm just soaking it all in.
So at Tennessee, I've seen you line up outside or inside in the slot. What are you more comfortable at?
Anywhere. I like being anywhere. I'm very confident in my skill set. The ball's in the air, it's mine. I take full ownership of it.
And in terms of your game is physicality, your release, the way you catch through the contact. Is that something that you've worked on, something you pride yourself on in terms of being a physical receiver?
That's kind of just like my life. That kind of expresses where I come from, kind of expresses just, how I grew up. That physicality has always stuck with me, and, since I was a little kid growing up as the youngest on, with, how many siblings? Five siblings, including me. I had to grow up tough, and, big shout out to them, man. They made me who the man I am today.
So my comp for you watching you on tape is Brandon Marshall.
Yeah, I love Brandon Marshall.
Have you heard that before?
That's my second favorite receiver. I hate to say second, you know what I'm saying? But
who's your first?
Calvin Johnson. That's my dog, man. Yeah, for sure. Megatron, man. I love watching his game.
Can't hate that at all.
Yeah, you feel me? But man, Brandon Marshall, man, I always love to watch him play. For sure. Yeah.
So, covering the Chicago Bears, have you spoken with the Bears?
I just spoke to the Bears about 2 minutes ago.
I mean, they didn't talk about in terms of where they want you, like.
Nothing too specific. Just trying to get to know me, and it's just a great conversation. And then the man.
I mean, well, appreciate it. Had a great week.
Thank you.
Great game.
Yeah, Danny, he was great, man. So after we ended the interview, he's like, "You guys gonna bring me to the bar room? You got to have me to the bar room, right?" And he actually literally, so we did the interview with him just as the Bears were finishing talking to him. So here's a couple of guys in Bears barroom gear standing there watching the Bears scout ask him questions.
Exactly. I knew that, obviously, but I did want him on record to say that he speaks to the Bears just so we could have that that little tape bit there as well. But Jennings is a kid that, for me, you heard on that cut there, my comp from is Brandon Marshall, and he's a guy that's not going to necessarily beat you with speed and with quickness, but will beat you with physicality. A guy who at the point of catch can go up and get the ball high pointed, amongst the crowd, can catch the ball with the defender draped over him. So he's got that ability. He's got some sneaky quickness. I don't want to say he's a guy that's going to be a blazer per se, but he's a guy that can beat you, if you will, with some quickness in terms of his his foot route running and be able to get some of that separation and then use some of that physicality, some of his length to be able to go up and make a play downfield. So he's not necessarily the kind of player I've been talking about in terms of the receiver position, a speed guy, the guy can take a top off a defense, but he is a playmaker. And of course, you always want to have playmakers. So, you may not always get what you're looking for in terms of height, size, speed, and all that stuff. But if you get playmakers, 9 times out of 10, those guys are going to become successful NFL players. So, Jennings is just that. He's just a playmaker. He might not run a blazing 40 at the combine, but he's got the height, he's got length. He's got soft hands, and he made a terrific play in the actual game itself where he created separation at the goal line and created some of that, ability to get past the defender and cradle the ball in nicely for a touchdown pass. So definitely a playmaker, definitely a guy, in the SEC, one of the better conferences in college football, was definitely a guy who always showed up and made some big catches, made some tough catches. Again, just a guy that hunger, that want to, that dog mentality that we look for in some of these athletes. Jennings, when you put on his tape, you see that.
Yeah, he in practice, he was chirping in practice, talking a little bit. I loved watching him in practice, and then, of course, Danny, as you just mentioned, the play he made in the game. He did have a couple drops in the game, but, I think he made up for that, with that touchdown catch. So overall, Danny, what a great time spent in Mobile, not only for you, for me, for Aldo, but one of the last things that Aldo and I got to do was present a badge of honor ball to the Senior Bowl committee and Jim Nagy, and it was definitely one of the highlights of the weekend. We actually were able to hand it to Dave Rogers, and he gave us a nice little interview related to it that we'll put out here at some point, and it was just an honor to be able to present the Senior Bowl with a badge of honor for. They don't just put this game on. They do and make donations, within the mobile community, to many agencies there. And then when they're preparing for the Senior Bowl, these players go to local hospitals, local organizations, and, meet with kids and ill families and so on and so forth. So they're doing a lot. It's not just about the game. It's about the community as a whole, and it was a fantastic experience and such an honor to be able to present them with a badge of honor.
Yeah, you see that when you go down there. This is my 4th year going down there, and you can see that the whole community embraces the event. It is an event. The Senior Bowl is an event for Mobile, Alabama. Like I said, everyone's into it. Everyone knows that you're in there for the Senior Bowl, and people are nice, people are great. And like I said, what they do for in terms of charity, you kind of just did a great job of describing all that stuff they do, Jim Nagy and the Senior Bowl committee. But they threw that parade this year. It was something new. They threw that concert in downtown, which is something new as well. So again, this is something that they continue to build on and continue to make it, I think where they invite the community and they make the community part of the whole experience as well. So that on top of all that, we talked about some of the charitable contributions they do within the community as well. So it's just a great honor and a well-deserved honor for the Senior Bowl committee.
Yeah, and just to expand on it, Danny, so some of the agencies they contribute to are the Child Advocacy Center, Special Olympics, the Boys and Girls Club of South Alabama, and they always do a charity run in November. And they also sponsor some NFL flag football leagues as well for children. So a lot that they do in the community, in and around Mobile, and it was such a blessing and a treat to be able to get down there and finally meet my man, the Godfather, in person, Mr. Eldo Gandia, and finally meet my man, Danny Shimon, in person. We've been doing this show since August. We've been on other shows together prior to working together. And it was such a blast, man, to be able to meet you guys in person. And I
likewise,
had a great weekend, man.
It was fun, especially the Godfather, Aldo Gandia. He's Mr. Mobile as well, man. This guy knows Mobile inside out. So, when he comes to town, everyone, they know he's in town, if you will. So, but it was fun meeting you. Obviously, hanging out with you and Aldo. It was a great time. And like I said, we watched some really good football players. Got to experience, at least you guys got to experience that concert and that parade, and then obviously the game on Saturday as well. So it's for those who have not made the trip, it's well worth your while. I mean, especially if you're into college football and the NFL draft and kind of seeing how everything plays out. You literally can sit in the stands next to an NFL scout or NFL GM 10, 15 feet away from you. So it's definitely an experience that I think if you like football, you like college football, you like the NFL draft, you should 1 year head down there. The tickets are free. You can get in and watch the practices. And like I said, it's a well worth your while. So definitely it's my 4th year, and I plan on continuing going year after year.
Hey, Danny, before we end the show, is there anything you want to add?
Just want to tell our listeners, hey, if there's any prospect you guys want to know about, whether it's a Senior Bowl guy or just a junior or whatnot, just hit me up either on Draft Tap at Draft Tap or at DShimon56, and I will go ahead and watch some tape on the prospect and then give you a detailed scouting report there on Twitter. Again, that's DShimon56 or at Draft Tap.
What a great show talking about the Reese's Senior Bowl and so much more. Thank you to Arif Hasan from The Athletic for coming on and chopping it with us related to the draft and the Senior Bowl. And thank you to everyone who listened live and joined us in the Mixlr chat. We hope you enjoyed this week's show. If you can't join us live, you can find the podcast version of Draft on Tap shortly after the live show on all your favorite podcast streams. Thank you to everyone at Bears Bar Room who continues to make the network as spectacular as it is. Oh, and don't forget to join us next week as we have Matt Lowe joining us from Lindy's Sports. He's a great guest, so be sure to tune in next week for more Draft on Tap. Good night, everybody.